Today's reading is from 2 Samuel, chapter 5, verses 1 to 10, and it can be found on page 243 of the Pew Bibles. Then all the tribes of Israel came to David at Hebron and said, "Look, we are your bone and flesh. For some time, while Saul was king over us, it was you who led out Israel and brought it in. The Lord said to you, it is you who shall be shepherd of my people Israel, you who shall be ruler over Israel." So all the elders of Israel came to the king at Hebron, and King David made a covenant with them at Hebron before the Lord, and they anointed David king over Israel. David was 33 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 40 years. At Hebron he reigned over Judah 7 years and 6 months, and at Jerusalem he reigned over all Israel and Judah 33 years. The king and his men marched to Jerusalem against the Jebusites, the inhabitants of the land, who said to David, "You will not come in here. Even the blind and the lame will turn you back," thinking, "David cannot come in here." Nevertheless, David took the stronghold of Zion, which is now the city of David. David had said on that day, "Whoever would strike down the Jebusites, let him get up the water shaft to attack the lame and the blind, those whom David hates." Therefore it is said, "The blind and the lame shall not come into the house." David occupied the stronghold and named it the city of David. David built the city all around from the Millo inward, and David became greater and greater, for the Lord, the God of hosts, was with him. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
So 2 Samuel 5 is this transition passage in Scripture, which is talking now about how did David become a leader and establish Jerusalem as the capital, right? And so I'm going to share 4 lessons of leadership, 3 good from David's life in this passage, and 1 not so good, bad actually. But I want to do that because I want to remind us that we're all leaders, right? You don't have to be CEO to lead the people in your sphere of influence at work. You don't have to be the mayor to have influence in your neighborhood. You're a leader there. You don't have to be the principal to not have some influence, or president of student council to have some influence at school. You, if for no other reason, then you lead your own life, right? One of the fruits of the Spirit is self-control, self-leadership, right? Is we are all leaders in one way or another. So how can we learn from David is the question this morning. But before I get into that, let's also acknowledge that each of us here has leadership baggage, right? I don't know what your early experiences were in leadership with your father, mother, teacher, boss, but let me tell you, if you've been here a while, you've heard this before, but let me tell you about my early experience. When I was the number 2 out of 4 pastors in Michigan, I served under a fantastic and very flawed leader named Mike. Mike had this ability to triple in size or quadruple in size every church he served. And then by the time he left, shortly after, it was like a balloon pop. It went down to the same size or less. His leadership was unsustainable. Mike was a tremendous leader from the pulpit, could inspire the 800 people that would be there on a Sunday morning, could challenge them to take another step towards service. Ottawa Reformed Church always led the way like North Branch leads the way in the classes. That was public leadership. But then there was private. You got along with Mike in the same room, and he sucked all of the oxygen out of that room by this huge ego. Everything was about him. Narcissistic to a fault. And I would struggle with that. And one time in particular I remember, he left Ottawa after 15 years in January of 98, and I left for here in August of 99. So I was, for 18 months, de facto, the leader of one of the largest churches in the Reformed Church, you know. And so Merle, one of the elders, and I were going golfing. And Merle, on the way to the golf course, said, "Hey, Todd, guess who I heard preach something?" I said, "No." He said, "Well, I was on vacation, and I went to the local chapel there by the lake, and Mike was preaching. And I would listen to his sermon, and I thought to myself, boy, how I miss him. And here I'm kind of taking this personally because I've been preaching weekly, since Michael left, and he misses Michael. But then he went on. He says, but all I had to do is shake his hand after the service, and I remembered why I was glad he left. Now, you've got to know that Mike was a naturally born athlete, right? So they shook hands after the service, and Mike said to Merle, according to Merle, "Hey Merle, you still swinging the golf club like a girl?" Wow, that is wrong on so many levels, right? Because Mike was a traditional male, dominant, kind of anti-female, certainly anti-gay leader. And he wanted to put you down to make sure you felt his superiority. So I had this public, tremendous public leader, horrible private leader as a model, and I have always struggled through that. That's my baggage. What's yours? David. So as I said, David gives us 3 great lessons for leadership and 1 failure in this passage. And let's look at them. The first one, they're obvious, but they're obvious and we overlook them all the time. The first one is leaders are not leaders unless they're followers, right? So we read in the passage. Before that, let me just add, in that day, how did one family's king overtake the son of the other family, right? Saul's family, David's family, different families. Jonathan is the heir to Saul's throne. What would happen? In those days, David's family would overthrow Saul militarily, and then David could ride. That's not what happened. Then all of the tribes of Israel came to David at Hebron and said, "Look, we are your bone and flesh." So all the elders of Israel came to the king at Hebron, and King David made a covenant with them at Hebron before the Lord, and they anointed David king over Israel. What's happening here? There's no democracy. There are no elections at this time in history. But yet, all of the leaders come to David, and they say, we see you're the leader that we need for this crisis post-Saul. Help us out. And David makes a covenant with them and becomes king. Almost democratic, the way this happened. Never did things happen like that in the ancient world. And so, surely, we have to remember that you're not a leader unless you got followers, right? Very obvious, and yet often forgotten. I can't tell you how many times in Mike's office I felt like Boris Yeltsin in 1991 in Red Square, putting my hand up against the Russian tank to preserve democracy. I'm sure Mark feels this way sometimes with me, right? We're in our leadership bubble, and we are rolling like a mighty tank towards that goal, and we forget that nobody's following us, that the needs of the community are over there, right? Because all leaders have blind spots. And you need your marks to point that out to you and help you remember, oh yeah, I'm supposed to serve them, not me. We forget that all the time. You forget that where you lead. I forget that where I lead. And we forget that at our peril. And then think about Jesus, David's perfect descendant, who lived this out by, Philippians 2 says, not considering equality with God, Paul writes, something to be held onto, but let go of his power and influence and came down to be born on this earth to a lowly family in a lowly manger to serve humanity in order to renew them. How do you know if you've got followers or not? If you're oriented towards service or selfishness. It's the first lesson. Very obvious, often forgotten. Second lesson from David we learn here is just lead. Here's how it happened with David. Remember, David had a mentally unstable leader in King Saul, right? King Saul would set him up with a darned if you do, darned if you don't situation. He would say, look, I need you, David, to go out and lead my troops to defeat that enemy. And David would do it, and he would do a great job. And King Saul, he would come back, and King Saul would be jealous and throw his spear at him. Right? So David could have sat there and said, well, why do I even try? Every time I do something, he makes sure he gets me in one way or the other. I'm just going to give up. David could have said, that's not what he did. In the past, those leaders said, when Saul was our king, you were the one who really led the forces of Israel. And the Lord told you, you will be with the shepherd of my people Israel. You will be Israel's leader. The leaders noticed in David that even in hard times, he kept leading. Well, I got those two words also from Michigan, also from a male-dominant leader named Marv. Marv was a turkey farmer with a 6th grade education who was so successful in business that he helped balance the Reformed Church budget in 1999 with a $150,000 donation to our denomination. Right? Marv's got buildings named after him all through the Midwest at Reformed Church colleges or seminaries. In January of '98, Mike's left his last Sunday. I'm preaching my first sermon after Mike left. Marv sits there in the congregation and he thinks as a leader, he thinks, you know what, Todd probably wants to take over for Mike because this is one of the most prestigious churches in the Reformed Church. So Marv notices too, Todd is a people pleaser. He likes to make everyone happy. Leaders can't do that. What shall I say to him? And Marv decides that on the way out that day, he's going to shake my hand and give me 2 words. And those 2 words were my marching orders for 18 months in that interim. And Marv said to me in his typically grovelly voice, shook my hand and said only, just lead. Isn't that what Jesus did? Isn't that what Jesus did? You know, he could have, at any time in the Garden of Gethsemane, he said, you know what, I know you want me to go through with this, and I know that leaders have to sacrifice for the good of their followers, but I don't really want to. And he was sweating drops of blood. He was wrestling with this. And at any time he could have said, I'm not going to lead. I resign. But he didn't. And he went to the cross, and he went through the cross, through the suffering, to the empty tomb. Of course, there is no gain without pain and sacrifice, right? Just lead. Whatever you're facing, whatever opposition your endeavors are encountering in your family, in your neighborhood, in your workplace, in yourself, we need to say with David and Jesus, I will lead. Third lesson, last positive lesson that we learn from David in this passage, is to be strategic. I have missed this many times in reading this passage, but let me point it out to you. The king and his men marched to Jerusalem against the Jebusites, the inhabitants of the land, who said to David, you will not come in here, even the blind and the lame will turn you back. Thinking, David cannot come in here. Nevertheless, David took the stronghold of Zion, which is now the city of David. How did David do that? He was strategic. David made political and military calculations here. Politically, he realized that Jerusalem was centrally located to Israel. And, most importantly, it did not belong to any tribe. So no tribe can say, oh, we're the favored one, look at us, our land, Jerusalem, ha-ha. No, it didn't belong to any tribe, it was centrally located. Politically wise. And militarily it was wise. Take it from me, Rabbi Arnie and I were jogging in Jerusalem in January, and to go to Jerusalem and the Temple Mount, everything is uphill. So we jog a whole lot slower going up than we did, of course, going down, right? Because it's impregnable in those days. High on a hill, anyone can look down and get the enemies that are coming forward. So what does David do? If you read more carefully into this, he cuts off the water supply. Well, if you can't drink, you can't defend yourself for very long, right? He was strategic. Here's the problem that I see too often in my own leadership and in our lives, that we are not strategic as often as tactical. okay, what's before me? What's the pressures? What's urgent? What's the easy way here? How can I score the most immediate points for myself? Strategic. What's the best way to go about this? Jesus, the perfect descendant of David, had to make a strategic decision too. He made it Luke 9, verse 2. And there it was, all of his followers were telling him, don't go to Jerusalem. Don't go to Jerusalem. Because they knew he had riled up the religious powers that be enough that they wanted to kill him. But David knew that he had to sacrifice. That he had to, Jesus knew he had to sacrifice. He had to go to that cross in order to stretch his arms out to redeem us all. And Luke 9:2 says, after all this feedback, Jesus set his face to go to Jerusalem. And that's where he went. And that's what he did. He was strategic in knowing the best way to redeem humanity. Now, here is where we see David's failure in this section. This 8th verse, we don't quite know how to interpret it, but either way, any way we interpret it, it's negative on David. It says, David had said on that day, whoever would strike down the Jebusites and let him get up the water shaft, remember, cut off the water, to attack the lame and the blind, those whom David hates. Therefore it is said, the blind and lame shall not come into the house, that meaning the temple. Well, that is looking down on the weak, right? That is saying, that's at least mocking the weak, if not generally putting up barriers to the blind and the lame from participating in God's house and in the restoration of God's work in the world. The blind and the lame. You know what's interesting? Sometimes we think that we're strong when we put down or mock or hold at bay the weak. I do that sometimes. Do you do that sometimes? I was at a table the other night and I kind of made a crack about something and somebody said, you know, HR in our company wouldn't let you say that. And I thought, yeah, that's right. That wasn't a very good crack, right? Mocking the lame and the weak. Great story about Jesus. So truly strong leaders measure their effectiveness by lifting up the weak. Here's what Jesus did. Jesus' greatest show of power before the cross was towards the end of his life when he went into the temple and he was offended that all of these money gougers were with a monopoly on selling sacrifices, were jacking up the prices to rip off the poor who needed that sacrifice for that dove or that sheep or that goat or whatever they were sacrificing. And so they jacked up the prices and Jesus got, I keep doing Jesus and David, right? Jesus got upset. And he went in there, he made a whip out of cords, and he whipped the animals out of the place. He got them out of the way, and he upended the money and the tables, and the money went all over. And he said, my Father's house is a house of prayer, and you have turned into a den of thieves. Pretty powerful. Pretty impressive. You know what the next thing he did? Read about it in Matthew 21. Jesus entered the temple, drove out all who were selling and buying in the temple. He overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who sold doves. And watch it in verse 14. The blind and the lame came to him in the temple, and he cured them. Because Jesus knew that truly strong leadership is always, always measured by lifting up the weak. So I would summarize all of those lessons to say that David and Jesus teach us that we need to be, I'll say, we leaders rather than me leaders. Leaders in our neighborhoods, in our work, in our church influence, in influences in our own life. Leaders that try to lead for the best of all and not just for the best of me. That's the challenge. Those of you that are leaders in the church know this last story that I close with, and for some of you it will be a new story. Our neighbor on Church Road over there came to my house about 7 months, my office about 7, 8 months ago. And he came in and he said, Todd, I want to give the church my house. I need a little bit from it, but I want you to do what your church has always done. Like Kirkside, shared senior housing, Sunrise, transition from the poor, for the homeless, affordable counseling that happens sometimes at the Hope House. I want you to do something with them. And after he picked me up off the floor, I said, well, give me a little time to think about this. So I came back to him in a couple of days, and after I talked to some of our leaders, or emailed some of our leaders, I said, Rich, what would really be great is if you would give us whatever portion of the house you want to give us, and we could turn around and sell it, and then have a capital endowment that could help pay for all of those shingles and those windows and those doors that we need at all of these places. No, he said, he came back a couple of days, no, I want you to do a mission with it. So I thought about it, I prayed about that. And I thought about, you know what, we're doing this work with this Affordable Housing Corporation out of Reformed Church in Highland Park that was helping us try to work on a Midland project, which we couldn't find the right house for, and we're struggling with that. What if they bought the house through public money, and Rich gives us back whatever he decides to give back, and then they maintain the house, and we're able then to be compassionate partners to whatever family or needy group is in that house. So I proposed that, and Rich said, great idea, let's do it. So we've been working on it. Bridgewater just committed a couple weeks ago to $200,000 through the Affordable Housing Corp to buy that house. The Reformed Church has committed $100,000 to it. We have the price. We're going to sign the deal. We hope if everything moves through, we plan to close. Originally it was by July 19. I don't know, we'll probably get delayed, but in the near future. And then Rich will do whatever he does in terms of what he wants to give back to us. But here's the thing. Rich was saying, I don't need all the proceeds from my house, but I want to help the neighborhood, right? Rich watched North Branch, who has, for years, 34 years since Kirkside, helped the neighborhood through the houses. And I said, well, I got to find a way for us to do this together. Well, we lead. You have been we leaders for 30-some years, and he saw that, and he appreciated that. And we don't know who we're going to put there. Rich is a vet, so we want to do something with veterans, but it's not ideal for individual veterans, so we're looking at maybe somebody who helped the veterans in Iraq or Afghanistan, or guides or whatever, and now they're marked and they got to get out of the country, and so they're first going to work to try to see if we can get a family like that, might be Iraqi or Afghani, and we'll be the compassionate partners, and we'll welcome them into the neighborhood, and we will do what's best for them, because when we help the weak, we're all stronger. That's what Jesus teaches. And that's what we give ourselves to. And here is another opportunity for us to serve again. Let's pray. Jesus, we thank you for your tremendous example. We thank you for David's flawed but pretty good example. And we thank you that sometimes you reach down and lift us up so that we can do what's best for others, and sometimes you teach us by your Holy Spirit that where we missed and how we can do better next time. So help us, whatever it is, whatever opposition we face, whatever are in our own heads, our own narcissism, our own whatever, help us to think clearly and know directly, and have your power to help all, to be the strong leaders that by your grace lift up the weak, for you have done that for us. We give ourselves to that. In your name we pray, and all God's people say.
Amen.